Hey guys, and welcome. And today we're finally going to do the COTA extensive track guide. It's already running, and I'll spare you of my face while we go through the lap once more. So I've loaded up the BMW lap I recently did a month ago or so after all the patches came through. So not the first one, but the final patch that we're running right now. And it seems on COTA, at least, the shorter gearing is helping the BMW. In fact, and I ended up doing a 203.8, which is also recorded on Popometer, and I provided the setup there as well. So this already said you can get this exact data and setup that I'm using here. And then I think COTA is probably one of the trickiest tracks right after or even before Suzuka, I'd say, because additionally to car placement being very, very important here, we also have the track limits that are a lot more tricky to handle than they are on Suzuka, and this is the first thing we'll see here, and what already sets probably the more proficient on the game apart from the beginners is that everything the game allows you to use, you need to use, and it starts here with a braking zone, and I almost get the feeling that we have those braking zones here like you see very much on the F1 game, where they always brake on the curbs, and the track limits here allow that, the grip on the curbs allows that, so you'll also see me braking on the curbs on the outside for the corners a lot. So that's the first thing you want to see here. Let's find the first braking marker then, but maybe after we've seen how much I'm actually using. So this white line is going to define the off track, so the left side tires need to stay within those white lines here, and it's going to repeat on a lot of curbs here. Let's find the braking marker, and I think it's pretty much this white line here. So everything looks rather similar here, so you really need to check. And there we see the 50-meter board, so we are probably around the 100-meter board here where this line is drawn. And maybe additionally you can look ahead where all the ad boards are on the side there, and then just choose the white line before that as your braking marker. Now we're already facing the first couple challenges here in the braking zone, which is it's rather bumpy. And then we have this huge wave here in the tarmac or in the road that we probably want to take a look at with from a zoom perspective. Or maybe if we go here, you could see that the car is just about to climb that hill. Let's try with a bit more zoom, then maybe it gets more pronounced even. Can we fly around there in a good way that we can actually see this? Probably like this. It's difficult to see, I think. It is difficult to show. Let's try from here. Yeah, this is better. I think if we fly across here, you can see how aggressive basically the shape is. And from going uphill, which is going to help you in your braking, you're coming over this crest, which will eventually make it a lot harder to brake. And suddenly you have very little grip where the car almost wants to kind of start flying, right? Not actually, but it gets really, really light over this crest, so you can't apply a lot of brake there usually. So back in the cockpit will most likely hopefully see me respect that. So when we come over the crest, you need to let go of the brake a little bit until you find the front end responding to your steering input again, because it's very easy over this crest to get in a situation where the front tires lose the grip, and if you just stay on the brake, they're not gaining it back, and it's probably just going to carry you straight out of the corner. And then once the car settles over the crest, you can start really turning in, release the final bit of brakes. And the issue here always is that the inside curb is, no matter what camera you're using, it's mostly hidden behind the A-pillar, so it's always tricky, and finding the reference points along the way to turn in the car into the corner. Let's roll it forward one more time and slow it down here. Just try to see where the apex is there. And just stays within frame here for me. Now almost disappears. Does disappear. And now it's really tricky to find it again. So this is something where you really need to focus your eyes on where that apex is and always keep it in the back of your head where it was should it disappear behind the A-pillar. And I guess it's pretty different depending on which car you're in. Probably in the McLaren, the side should be better because you sit much more forward. In other cars, you might sit even deeper in the cockpit, like the Nissan, for example, or whatever, where this might disappear entirely. So finding a way to cut across the track there and still making the apex just because you're not losing track of it. And maybe Popometer can help you to visualize that line a bit and see how we're approaching this corner. So you can pretty much see this is here in the braking track. This is where the crest is going to appear, where the car gets a little lighter, is not really going to convert any harsh braking or steering into a force on the tires. So we're just respecting that crest. And then after the crest, we can let go of the brake and increase our turning angle to actually go for that chicane. Chicane hairpin, of course. See me doing a little correction here because, as I said, it's tricky to follow this hairpin and actually find the exact right point. The ABS does its thing to increase the inconsistency here a bit that you'll experience on the braking. So there's always going to be correction one way or another. Sometimes you'll brake another time. Sometimes you might even need throttle to delay the apex and corner a bit to come to the inside. So in this case, I was still carrying a tiny bit too much speed, which is, I think, the better option than going too slow, because with the additional braking, you get the front pushed into the ground, the rear comes around, you get the nice rotation that you can keep then going once you go into the throttle. Typical things here to analyze is the apex is obviously very, very natural here in the middle of the corner. Also, just look at the track shape. It's really deceiving as you come from a very wide track and your brain just tells you the track is going to stay as wide on the exit, but it's definitely not. It's staying a lot tighter. And this also leads to the slowest point in the corner actually being after the apex, because you can't carry as much speed out of the corner as if the track would be wider. So we're slowing down far, deep and wide into the corner, almost post the apex. And then the slowest point in the turn is somewhere here, where we're already going into the throttle there. So apex right in the middle, slowest point slightly after that apex, and then you're bang on the throttle. Probably, depending on the car, want to manage the throttle a bit because it's very bumpy on the exit. You're still going somewhat uphill, I think, and just makes it very tricky for the corner. The slow speed with a lot of steering angle applied to actually get going, and just slamming the throttle and forcing the TC to engage very brutally is not going to help. So managing a bit of throttle here should come in handy. Now for the next corner, you don't actually have to take a very aggressive swing to the left. The important bit is to build the speed out of the corner. That's more important. Being allowed to use as little steering angle as possible, which you do by having a slightly later slow point in the corner and a more straightened up car. And then you really don't need to take the full swing to the left here because it just extends the distance that you have to carry. This corner isn't actually a challenge for the car, so it's fine to turn in from a slightly narrower position. And now this next one already, this is really where the problems start. And this whole section reminds me a lot of Suzuka, the first sector, just that we now have the issue additionally with the track limits. And if you don't sit very high in the car, then this corner here is already hard to see, because if we just go, sorry, I did a lot of laps that day. So you just go back a tiny bit. You can see here the corner is not yet visible, right? And still not, and still not. Now we get a first glimpse, and this is somewhere where the corner is. So you get the information of when to actually turn in quite late. And therefore, I'm also not going fully to the outside. This corner, again, not really a challenge for the car. So we don't have to take a wide swing here. And also, if you take a wide swing, let's go forward here, you'd probably have that car not facing in the direction it's facing now. But instead, if you took a wider swing, you'd be facing here. And then you just have that angle that you need to cover additionally to go into the right-hander. And I guess having such aggressive direction changes is most likely something at least the front engine cars won't like a lot. So we're trying to ease things on the car here a bit by not being too aggressive with a left-right. Okay, cutting across all the track I think is pretty clear. And now it's it becomes really tricky, and I think we want to dissect that section as slowly as we possibly can. And I really want to work this backwards. So there's the next hairpin, and we're going backwards, and I want to find the points that are the most important. So if we zoom in a bit, we always know carrying onto the straight, if you follow this channel, is the more important bit. So we're trying to make sure to carry a lot of speed out of the section, which means into this last corner, we need a wide entry. And this is what you can see here, really going a lot across the track here, trying to get the car as far to the outside as possible for a good entry into that last corner. So we're just marking one point here in our heads, which is exit of the second last corner of that section. There we want to be fully to the inside, which means entirely on the curb. This is one point we're aiming for. And now if we work that backwards, it means to get to this point, we have to adjust our line and the speed we carry in which places to really get to this point. And you can already see here, this will become very crucial, how we enter this corner and how we reduce the speed into this corner and how we can hook the car to the inside. And in order to get in a position where we can do this here, and I'll get to that in a second, we'll have to do something in the corners before to get there. The other bit is slightly before that. There is another of those things that influences how we can brake here, which means how we get the car in a position. I'll drag it up from the other direction, but here is the second important point where we want to bring the car in as wide entry position as possible. Okay, so these 2 points are going to define everything we're doing through the section. Okay, so here's a wide point. Let me actually quickly mark it just for a second here. Here's an important point, being as far to the outside as possible, and here being as far to the outside as possible. The reason for this one is that this allows us to carry speed through the left-hander while also not needing to fully extend to the very limits of the track, because that will in turn allow us, and now let me zoom in, to brake aggressively to build somewhat of a straight line here before going into this longer double apex right-hander, so to say. This straight line, you're building this straight line into your lap. This is very, very crucial to get consistency through the next corner, and therefore get consistency and continuously good exits from this section. This straight line, I can't emphasize it enough, it's really important. You need to have a straight car here so you can get rid of the speed and get rid of the speed in the same way every lap. And to get in this position, we need to get done over with a corner, and it doesn't work if you will be in a very wide position here or so. Then from this place onwards, you're really lost to get this car into the corner, and everything turns to shit afterwards, and you'll every time have different speed going into the next corner and the next braking zone. You'll never have a reliable braking point because your speed will differ, and the same amount of braking will lead to different outcomes through this corner. So getting consistency in this corner is very, very important for the exit of the section. And to get this consistency, we need the same braking point every lap. And this braking needs to be in as much of a straight line as possible, and we achieve that by maximizing the entry position for this left-hander. Okay, now let me show you what I mean. And the other corners before, they're not actually as important, but we'll go through there. Okay, so entering the section here, very important indeed is during the transition to still be full throttle during the weight transfer. This is what we can see here, right? We're entering the left-hander, steering to the left. Then we cross the 0 point in the steering here, start steering to the right. So we're doing the weight transfer, full throttle, very important. If you go off throttle at this point in time, the car is going to be really, really loose. Try to uncouple the weight transfer from right to left and steering from left to right, and only afterwards going out of the throttle. That is really important and will stabilize your car a lot by doing these things haphazardly. turn in first, then go off the throttle, the car is going to be 10 times more predictable throughout the next part of the track. Then don't slam the brakes. Really important. Don't slam the brakes, because once the ABS triggers, you become more of a passenger. And if you do a lot of braking as well, the car is going to change its behavior, which is just not desired. We only want a tiny adjustment of the speed, because each corner here is going to be a bit tighter than the one before. And we therefore need to make very, very mild speed corrections, which is what those tiny brake inputs here try to achieve. And we also try to do somewhat of find points on the track that we are almost straight on, where you do the braking and reduction of speed. So here we're cornering. That's why here, jump with me, please. Here, the brake input is very, very little. Let's roll it forward very, very slowly now. So I'm just trying to see now, okay, how much is the car actually turning in? How much is my speed matching the radius that I want to drive? And then I'll notice also how much of the track am I using to get a good entry into the next corner. And I'll just notice here, okay, the car still has a bit of excess speed. I'm not cutting across the track too much, and I can just use a tiny bit of brake to just reduce the speed by a couple of kilometers, 3, 4, 5 maybe. It's probably not going to be more than that, to allow the car to take a very, just to change the radius a tiny amount and go across that curb as much as I can manage in the situation, because as I said, we come into the section kind of blind. Looking at this from the back, we know again the white line is going to be the limit, and the outside tires should just about stay within the track there. Now, next thing that happens is a direction change. Wait for it. And just when I go across the 0 line, this is why I want to deploy the braking, because when the steering is neutral, the car will behave neutral on the brakes as well. So the timing here is really important to, as you see here, as I go into the brake, I quickly go to neutral in the steering for the car to not suddenly veer into one direction or the other. So this is important too. Instead of here where you decouple it, here you need to kind of couple the movements together in order to not lose the car. Then same thing applies for the next corner. It's just ever so slightly tighter. We need a bit less speed through the left-hander. And again, the curbs are, I think here even the track limits are a bit allowing us to do a bit more. Yeah, we can cut across the white line here, as the line must be somewhere else, middle of the curb or maybe the edge of the curb there. This is also sadly slightly different per car, so you want to find your, for whatever you're driving, you want to find your personal line there somewhat, how much you can use in that car. And now we get to the thing that I already mentioned. It isn't the place, but what we want to achieve here again is, and that corner is very interestingly shaped. See, I'm still flat out, and just about when we are coming here. Now let's check again for the transition in the steering from one direction to the other and the off-throttle moment. And here it's different compared to the entry into the section. Here, steering from one side to the other, going off throttle, and even going into the brake is all happening somewhat at the same point, because I want to deliberately unstabilize the car here to make it turn into the other direction. I want to have the rear a tiny bit in the air for the car to be more willing to change direction here more aggressively. So this is all happening somewhat in the same moment. Bring the weight forward on the car, swing it over to the other side, and your rear end is going to feel a bit more loose, a bit more willing to actually make that direction change. But you have to manage that. So this is really just a tiny short input here on the brake. If you do too much there, then A, you will lose too much speed, and B, the car is going to be too loose. So it's really just an adjustment of speed and a tiny bit of upsetting the rear in order to make that transition change work. But as soon as you've made that tiny impulse to the car, you need to get rid of that again and allow the car to stabilize a bit. And because every time we go through these corners, the speed is going to vary. There will be a lot of things happening on the brake that will be different lap after lap. It's never going to look the same. But the important thing here is, looking at this corner, we do have a double apex, right? We clip the first apex right away. We keep slowing down through 2/3 of the corner or so until we finally reach our slowest speed here. So if we mark this in our typical fashion, 1 apex here, 1 apex here, and the slowest point in the corner very, very late. So maybe if you think Spa, the corner after Les Combes, Bruxelles, you know it's very similar, where we would have the slowest point in the corner somewhere here or so, right? Doesn't work here because the grippy part of the track is for a fair bit to the inside, and also just how the corners are shaped, right? This is a fairly non-corner, or it's a very wide radius, high speed, and then the corner opens up and then it tightens again. So it's really, really tricky to follow all these shape changes of the track, and finding your line through there consistently is indeed really tricky. So what you want to achieve is have a first apex here, then carry wide, keep reducing the speed until a very late point, and when you are sure, you'll actually make that second important apex all the way to the inside to keep the car over to the right here, right? We earlier marked this point as really important, staying as far to the outside there as possible to set up the next part of the section. And in order to do this, we only need to reduce a tiny bit of speed, right? Most of the time I'm just rolling and making tiny corrections with the brake to tuck the nose in a bit and reduce the speed a tiny bit further for the car to eventually get the rotation that we need to get the car to this second apex. So in the cockpit then, this looks like this. We can probably remove those markers, and I'll probably just keep it slow here. Maybe quarter speed over the first apex, and now just rolling and checking how much grip am I getting, how much is the car sucked in by the curb, how much to the outside do I actually want to run. So keeping the speed alive. I know the second apex is not yet to arrive, it still takes some time. And now I notice, okay, let's mark those 2 points, and I'll actually roll it back another couple seconds to describe another thing. So let's just mark a random point on the car. So what we're doing is, let's mark here the edge of the wiper. What we are perceiving while driving is that as long as the curb is fading away into this direction, away from this point, we know we are going too fast because we are going away from the corner. And once the curb is coming back to this point, means we are now slow enough to drive a tighter corner than the corner actually is. So if I roll it forward now, again, really slowly, you can see, okay, now clipping the first apex, and now you can see, okay, the curb is moving to the right, okay? So we're going away from the corner, we are still too quick. And now you can already start to see that the curb is kind of stabilizing in the distance it has to this. I mean, the point could be anywhere, right? But the distance to the point now stays stable. And now we are cutting across the point in speed where the curb starts coming back to us. And this is how we then know, okay, now our speed is small enough. Now we're coming to the inside. Now the car starts rotating. And if we wait any longer, we're going to cut across the curb on the inside too much. So this is the point. When you notice the curb is coming towards you again, then you start applying the power again. And I'm quite aggressive here on purpose to get the rear rotating. And rotating and rotating, and exploit the inside curb, which destabilizes the car even a bit and helps me with the rotation. And then I have to manage the throttle there a bit. You can see this, it's not full throttle. Car's really loose, barely any steering. But the important bit is, as soon as off the curb, very aggressive positioning over to the right side. And this is what you see a lot of streamers and even good drivers not managing. Getting the car over to the right side here to set up the next part of the section in a consistent and fast way. Again, direction change or transition, we'll again see in the, let's have this here. We are here. Just start there. So we need to go back even a tiny bit in the chart here. Again, so turning to the right, aggressive, full throttle. And again now, direction change happening under full throttle, which keeps the car stable, right? So you can really throw it to the inside quite aggressively with the steering as long as you stay on throttle. And only after you've made that direction change, I'm going out of the throttle, even keeping it on a low level here a bit to not have too much of an aggressive weight change to the front, not a too aggressive engine brake engagement, not too aggressive overall, and not losing too much speed right away, because we first really have to see how much the front tires grip up, how much we're going into the corner. And if you're too aggressive, the next problem appears here, because suddenly, after we've been able to use a lot of curb all the time, now we come to the situation where they have this anti-cut in on the inside, which is really harsh for the car, and you can easily bottom out, and there's only a few situations where you'll actually get the car across there in a, where's my thingy here, get the car across there without bottoming out. Looks like in this instance I'll be fine, but only works when you have a very unloaded inside of the car, so the car doesn't get lunged either into the ground or into the air. Unloaded inside is the key here. And now you'll see, again, aggressive on the throttle, but I'm not running as wide as the black line here suggests. Because if we do this, I mean, I'm keeping away maybe half a meter or so, right? But that tiny bit already matters if we look from behind. I'm not going onto that curb. I need to be done with this earlier, because now I have the straight line ahead of me, the short straight line ahead of me, where I'm able to get rid of a lot of speed. And this is going to be very crucial to manage this part of the track. This, again, if we look at it, similar to this corner, very similar, somewhat of a double apex, just, yeah, quite a bit tighter, slower speeds. And I would say we have somewhat of an apex here. There's a perception of overshooting and then coming back for a second apex, almost, even though looking at the line, it looks quite different. So let's see how it looks on board. But the perception is keep slowing down over a first apex to the middle of the corner, get hooked by the curb, and once you do, start the power to rotate the car while accelerating, but hook it to the very inside here, which then becomes the outside as a turn-in point for this next one there. Okay, let's look at it in the cockpit. Again, somewhat straight braking managed here, harsh braking. The initial turn-in, you see the car wasn't really responding there because I was fully on the brakes, just giving the car like a nudge into that direction. And to get rid of that speed, it really needs that short straight line. And now we're starting to aim for that curb, which is starting, once we're across that, the curb will start to pull us in. And the important bit is now, if we keep slowing down all the way, we get the same thing again, that initially, if we use this point, we're going to be too quick to stay in the corner. So the curb is going to somewhat go into this direction. And then comes the point sooner or later where the curb will come back towards us and we'll drive a tighter radius than the corner actually is, which in this case here becomes a problem because of the track limits. And we're really using all the curb here all the time. And if I'm not going into the throttle now, I'll immediately get the track cut. So it's really important to get the power down, open the steering a bit, and let the car rotate with the rear so that your outside tires are always staying somewhat within the track limits, which in this corner again does not seem to be the white line, but it's some artificial point somewhere on that curb for whatever reason. So yeah, finding this is quite tricky. But the important bit is how you control staying within that limit. First, you're carrying too much speed, and as soon as you become too slow and the curb starts, and the car starts climbing more of the curb, you need to be back on power to increase the speed, to drive the wider radius and stay within the track limits, and have this wide entry point here. I always found it fascinating watching F1 and MotoGP, how Hamilton and Marc Marquez were maximizing this right side curb here to have the good entry into the left hand. And you can see quite a few different lines, even among F1 drivers and MotoGP riders. And those two, Hamilton and Marquez, they always stuck out to me by maximizing this curb on the right here to get an entry into this left-hander. Okay, then this left-hander, again, full throttle in the transition, but then we again have this anti-cut here, which is going to upset the car. Staying flat on the curb might be great, but it doesn't work in every scenario. And also here, the track limits are just so nasty. It's very easy to go too wide, and here it's... you can barely touch the white line and it will be off track. Very nasty. Another thing we just saw there is, and we might see this better here, right over the apex. You can see, where's the last one here? Sorry. Right over the apex there, you can see I am doing the short shift here. Because in second gear, the car's just a bit too aggressive, too much power output, and the bump is just upsetting the car a bit. So the short shift here helps me to keep the car stable over this curb. And speed-wise, yeah, it just about works. Normally, you'd pull the second gear a little longer, but anyway, the stability is worth a little more than having the engine in the perfect RPM range there. Okay, this was the most difficult part of the track already covered, so now it gets more easy. Roll it forward a bit, and from now things will just start to repeat somewhat what we had before, which is braking on the outside curb. So I'm right away going for that, going over to the right side here, and then braking again somewhere next to this white line, which is a really good marker. And stay straight for a long time here before you actually turn in. And also, I'd say don't get deceived by the black stuff here, because it really takes a wide turn, and not sure we actually want this. Looking at the corner from above might help a bit. We, again, similar to turn 1, we have this really wide track on entry, which, yeah, kind of deceives people into thinking there's a lot of space, but after the corner, it's quite a bit narrower. So if you have a full wide here, there's only going to fit 3 cars there, and good luck with that. But then, again, apex right in the middle, slow speed of that corner right in the middle, very normal hairpin, not a lot to say to that, other than do your normal trail braking. Well, you might even be able to do this better than I did here, but just to correct your position, keep the nose tucked in with tiny brake inputs if needed. Make sure to rather carry too much speed than too little, and being forced to make corrections on the brake than having corrections on throttle on entry. Then onto that straight, there is not a lot about to say about that. Then we have the next hairpin, which, yeah, is now kind of forcing or defining things that are to come afterwards. So this one is a bit more tricky already than the hairpin before, but not an awful lot. Let's look at it a bit, where the breaking point really lies. Let's go forward here. Again, I'm going onto the curb early here, so I don't have to think about later. And then just looking at the boards, 250, 200 on the right, 150, and our breaking point is going to be just behind that 150 board. If you want, let's see from above, I think it could well be, yeah, okay. When I'm driving there, it feels more like it would be in the middle of these 2 white markers, but you can see it's right after that 150 meter white marker. Let's say 140, 130 meters, 135 meters maybe, where the breaking point is. And then make sure to stay actively straight, so to say. Don't get fooled into already turning for the corner. Just wait for the car to slow down. It will. Maybe once you reach the yellow boards, that's a good point to start turning in. Start the trail braking as you increase the steering. Everything very normal. Yeah, that was probably even aggressive. Maybe there's more time in there if I get the car to the inside a bit nicer. You don't actually, there was a lot of speed probably lost on the exit here from the slide oversteer. Probably a lot of TC engagement down here. There you go, all the way, traction control out of that corner. So there's probably a way to put the apex here a tiny bit closer, put it a bit later, have the slow speed slightly delayed too, and then I won't be forced to rotate the car so aggressively on acceleration, and then I might even build a little more speed on the short straight in between here. Now on this straight, you can already see by the graph is going to be a very aggressive transition over to the other side. There's very little time to position yourself for the next corner, so make sure you're doing it. Don't be lazy here. You need to come over to the right side and don't wait to do it, right? Don't wait until the black stuff starts. Do it as quickly as you can. I think, let's go to the point where it looks most extreme. Yeah, I think here, this is before this car starts changing direction. So if we look at this from above, you'll see how aggressive the car is angled on the short straight, how much I'm going over to the other side, okay? Like hyper aggressive, so that you get the car straightened up before the next braking point. That's the important thing here, right? That is the tricky one. And braking wise for the next one, let's try to find that point. There are boards on the left, but they're hard to spot because you're focusing on something entirely different. It's just slightly into where the ideal line is black again, for me. And then straight line, wait with the turn in a bit. It's gonna pay off. Don't follow the black line immediately, do it slightly later. Trail long time into this corner. The slowest speed, let's find out in Popometer tool. Apex looks really, well, middle of the corner-ish. Slowest point in the corner. Oh, we haven't actually jumped here. Slowest point in the corner is very much in the middle there, I'd say. And I think now in this corner you have a few options. This is pretty similar to Misano turn 4-5, if I'm counting correctly. There's also a double right. With a similar pattern, only that both corners are 90 degree and very similar in shape, equally tight. This one starts with a very tight corner, which is, will start the 120 degrees or so, with the other one being more like 80 or a bit less, something around, maybe this is 130, because they're both a little more than 180 by the looks of it. Anyway, so let's say this is 130, this is just 80. So it's opening up. And now if you run really wide, you'll probably build more speed in this phase here. But then you have to get done with the rotation later. So it's really a matter of choice where and when you want to build the speed. For example, you can keep it a bit tighter here and then have more of a straight later to build the speed, or you build some speed here but then need some time to get the rotation done. There is a bit of preference, and it will always be a compromise, I think, one way or another. You're most unlikely to really go all the way to the outside curve because it takes forever for the car to rotate, and the game just, yeah, it just benefits when you are able to straighten up the car quicker, because then you build more speed. So it kind of makes sense to not go all the way to the outside, just get the rotation done and then put the power down. From where do I actually do this? From here or so. When I'm done with the rotation, here is when I put the power down completely, and the rear tires will be able to take it now. Next corner, again, really tricky to find the compromise here, because you could think there might be a benefit from going all the way to the outside here and rotating the car then here and carrying more speed on that exit or whatever. The problem is this is a much wider line. There maybe isn't as much grip on the outside. Maybe there are marbles or whatever. And it just takes a long amount of time to actually rotate the car, and by the time you can start to accelerate, the gap has become so large that you can't really get back the time on the exit here before you enter the next corner. And also, if you carry more speed, it's not going to matter, because in that corner you actually have to, you can't use it, right? You have to brake down to a certain speed, and it doesn't give you a benefit if you carry 10 kilometers extra or whatever, and it's most unlikely to be 10 anyway. So the issue here is a bit finding half a straight line for the harsh braking, okay? So this is where there's only a little steering input here with a harsh braking phase, the initial one, very little steering input because we're trying to get rid of the speed. We can't steer at the same time, just going to ruin the tires and not actually slow the car down. And only once we go out of the brake, we can start increasing the steering angle. So this one here is really important to do smooth trail braking, else you will ruin your front tires. That's a given, okay? Then the slow speed in the corner, you can tell this is actually a bit before the apex, right? We get all the rotation done quite early before the car reaches the apex, and through the apex we're actually already accelerating quite aggressively, building speed for this next section there. So really tricky, probably halfway or middle of the track somewhat, always a compromise. First somewhat of a straight line to get rid of a lot of speed, and then as you start to turn in, very careful trail braking here to not overdrive the front. Let's see how it looks in the cockpit then. Here, getting the car straightened is more important than going all the way to the outside. I feel it just takes forever when you go to the outside to get the rotation, then you can't really accelerate. So it helps to stay a bit to the inside, get the car straightened, and now can apply the power. And still positioning the car here, right? Coming from somewhat of a outside position, aggressive turn into the left to get some rotation done. So next thing is that I'm trying to look for the somewhat straight braking and do all the rotation here. Okay, well, we're nearing the X or the end of the lap, going into, I don't know if it's where the sector line actually is, but let's just call it the last sector here that we're entering. And again, important, going all the way to the left quite aggressively. You need the wide turn-in to carry a lot of speed into this corner, and you'll see actually how far this goes. And I'm not going all the way to the inside right away, because I want to stay on the wider line for longer and come to the inside later. Let's see if we can visualize this here. Not going all the way to the inside, because this wider position is going to help me once the corner actually tightens. Okay, if you're on the inside here, you're probably carrying wider here, you don't get the rotation done, and then you have issues later on. Again, the exit of the corner, which starts here actually, is more important than the shortest line, so to say. So stay wide a bit, just shy of the curb, maybe a meter or two. Let's see how much actually is. Quite a bit away from that, right? And then only come to the inside for this actual somewhat apex here, for the yellow line maybe, if you will. We didn't find yet the slowdown point here, so again, going in. And now you know this is where I'm going off the throttle to reduce the speed a bit, to let the car rotate and actually come to the inside when I want it to. Tiny brake input here to tuck the nose in, reduce more speed, make sure that I'm going actually for that inside curve, and the corner tightens here a bit, so we need to carry less speed than we were able before. And then once the car gives you the feeling, okay, you've clipped that curb now, from here the corner is going to open. Right, another apex, so to say. So let's roll it backwards again. From this apex, this is where your slowest point in the corner will be, right on that yellow marker there. So let's find the slowest speed in the next corner here. So it's 18 to 20 here. Let's zoom in a bit. And the slowest point in the corner is here. Okay, so maybe you have this first apex that we're deliberately missing. Then you're the slowest on the second apex. Okay, this is where you're the slowest. Clipping that inside curb, and from there it needs a lot of commitment and very aggressive throttle application. It's probably going to differ per car, but this is what keeps the car rotating. Very aggressive throttle input. And then from here you can see we're carrying wide a bit, but the corner opens up, right? It's almost a straight in between here, right? There's nothing happening, so we can rotate there and correct position for the next one. And then come for a third apex that we're taking, going wide again, but the corner opens a bit here, right? So we carry more speed through this apex because we know the corner widens a bit. Then it tightens once more where we are going for the inside, and then it opens up one more time. So the important bit is your Slowest point in the corner. This is the most important one, and this is going to be on that second apex right next to this yellow line. If you want it from there, you just bang on the throttle, pray a bit, and force the car back over those other apexes here. And then, same thing again, don't be lazy. Keep positioning the car, because we have very little time afterwards, you'll see. So right over this apex number 2, opens up, apex number 3, opens up, apex number 4. And now keep turning, right? We want to go back on this curb because the game allows us to use this as track. So we're going all the way to the outside, trying to get the car straight just before hitting the brake or while hitting the brake. Everything is just about happening in time. And then let's see how harsh the brake input here actually is. Again, you should be able to see we're doing building somewhat of a straight line here. Sorry, didn't want that. Building somewhat of a straight line here into the track. So you can see the steering angle is very little here, almost going straight, which allows us to get rid of a lot of speed because the front tires can really put it into the ground. But you can see also not even full braking while the ABS is heavily engaging, so we don't need much more braking than that. And then your typical trail braking here with that very long nose at the end, which is owed to the speed we're carrying. We can't be too aggressive turning in. This is almost Pouhon speed here, where the car is hypersensitive, so we need to be really, really careful with the trail braking into this corner. And try to clip this apex there on the left. And also the shape of the track changes a bit. There's a bit of banking going on. And once we're on the curb, very, very normal corner, so to say, where we have the slowest point in the corner pretty much in line with the apex there where we're on the inside. Already maybe on power just slightly before. Once I notice, I'll clip that inside curb. I know I'm gonna make the corner, floor the throttle, keep the car rotating like that. And don't go too far here because the car easily bottoms out and then it jumps another couple centimeters and suddenly you're off track. Then for the last corner, it's actually tricky. The braking point is hard to remember which ad board is going to be the one here, but it's like slightly after the first one, I'd say, or pretty much in line with the first one, but your vision in the car is slightly different, so you're passing that board visually and then hitting the brakes, making sure you're not bottoming out here again. Very tricky. Could be that you need to lift the front a bit, limit the suspension range on the front a bit, maybe to stop the car bottoming out. And then the last corner is a bit of I'm trying to delay the apex, try to turn in a bit later than the black line suggests. Come to the inside for a somewhat late apex. Just about missed those sausages there, or just about hit them. Let's see what the data tells us here about this corner. Very similar in the braking application, harsh initially, and then this long, low-level trail braking to get rid of a last bit of speed. COTA overall is a very low grip track, and we need to make sure we're never losing the front end because it's not going to come back to us. Positioning-wise, I think, it might look wider on entry than it is on exit, but it might be deceiving me here a bit. So looking at it from here, the apex is right in the middle of the corner, or slightly, ever so slightly delayed, okay? Give me the benefit of the doubt here that this is a slightly delayed apex, and the slow speed in the corner might be a tiny bit earlier than that, but I could just as well be wrong here. Okay, then onto the straight, trying to not hit those sausages too hard, trying to not engage too much TC for too long, and then you can already stay on the outside because, as we learned, braking for turn 1 is going to be on the curb anyway. And then I do hope this track guide was useful for you, and of course I'm going to play the entire lap once again full speed, and then share it with others. Subscribe to the channel. Well, if you see this, you have already, but maybe subscribe or get data packs on the Popometer And then I'll hopefully see you very soon again. Bye.